I was letting my kids be in a terrible situation because of marriage. I was letting myself be torn down, abused, controlled, victimized because of marriage.
Welcome to the Audacious Life Podcast, where your host, Stephanie Roberts, welcomes you to listen to women from all walks of life share their stories of finding freedom from abuse. You'll hear experts give you real advice on what you need to do to create hope for your future. Make a plan and see that light at the end of the tunnel. You'll learn how to build yourself up spiritually, mentally, physically, financially, and legally. 1 in 4 women have experienced some form of abuse, and 80% of women who leave abusive relationships go back. It's time to change that statistic and give you the audacious life you've always wanted. A life of freedom, peace, and true joy. Put on your headphones and get ready to be inspired.
So I just want to welcome Renee Roberts Kopp to the Audacious Life Podcast. Renee has been on Dr. Phil with her case with her husband, and she's going to share her story with us about what happened there and where she is today. And I will pass it on over to Renee. Renee, thank you so much for your time and for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a great privilege to be able to share my journey and hopefully help one young lady or older lady, as in my case, out of a long-term marriage or out of a relationship, so they can get to a new level of freedom in their life. Mm-hmm. For me, my journey was a 24-year marriage, and I had no clue that I was in a domestic violence situation. I was living I had the 5 children. I was living what I thought was a pretty decent life, and I was even being hit during those 24 years, but I thought I deserved it. I thought it was my actions that actually caused me to receive this discipline.
Wow.
As a wife.
And
so
why did you think that?
One day, go ahead.
I was just going to ask why you thought that was normal, punishment of wife.
I don't know that I thought the punishment was normal, but I thought that I was so terrible that this was all he could do to wrangle me in. See, I'm outspoken, I'm outgoing, and he used my gifting against me, actually. And that was the point where you start losing yourself. When you start to think you're going crazy is where the one day in 2012, I decided I am going to start videoing. And my brother actually coined 2012 for me as the year of unraveling.
Really?
And that was where I started to, in retrospect, see things I hadn't seen before, how he was talking to the kids. The kids were telling me things about their dad, that he's an ogre, that he's a tyrant, that he's a dictator. And I tried to look at that as teenagers being disobedient, not liking what their father was saying. But there was something about it that rang different this time. We already had one child in college, and now the same thing was happening with number 2 and number 3. And all of a sudden I realized this just isn't right. And when one of my children was getting ready in April of 2012 to go on a business trip, I hated to leave home. Have a lot of opportunities during the year to travel for business, and I'll maybe do one trip if I have to. I was just never comfortable leaving the kids home with their father. And I had to do this one for the good of my company, for growth. And so I turned to my second oldest child and I said, listen, I almost had to separate you and Dad yesterday with a physical fight. And I have to go on this trip. Will you please keep yourself away from him? Because if you guys would have gone and hit each other, either one of you, I would have had to call the police because I can't tolerate that. That's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, oh, don't worry, Mom. I can handle myself. Dad's old and feeble. I can take him out at the knees.
Wow.
And it was like somebody poured ice water on me, and I woke up, and I thought, that's not normal. That is beyond normal for a child to say. Now, there might be some listeners that are listening to this and thinking, of course that's not normal. Well, to a healthy mind that has not been in an abusive situation, being taught to doubt your thoughts, to doubt what you think, yes, that is absurd.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in an abusive situation, everything has a filter on it from what your abuser wants you to think. So I was at this point of doubting what's right, what's wrong. Everything was cloudy. And I had trusted parenting to him because he had told me, hey, I'm from a big family. It's only you and your brother. I know what I'm doing. Hey, I know how to, I'm one of 5 children. We have 5 children. I'm better equipped for this than you. So I let him take over because he told me I wasn't a good parent. He told me that my kids didn't like my parenting.
Mm.
So I thought, hey, why don't I be the breadwinner? You be the parent. And so we had a little bit of a role reversal there, only because that seemed to be the best for the family.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't very motivated to work. I didn't mind working. It wasn't my goal in my life,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't mind it. I was willing to flip-flop for whatever the family needed. But anyway, so when that happened, it was like all of a sudden things started changing. I started videoing his altercations with the kids. And then I videoed him sitting on top of our 14-year-old. I guess he was 12 at the time. Oh, they were fighting over who won a basketball game in the Final Four, I think it was.
Wow.
And it was a verbal argument. I had enough of it. The game was over. I went downstairs to do laundry. All of a sudden, I hear screaming, bloody murder. I come running upstairs, and I started to pull my cell phone out of my pocket to put it ready to record because I was already in that mode. I'm recording things.
Mm-hmm.
And I started recording him sitting on top of my son, slapping him 9 times in the stomach because he wouldn't do what my husband wanted him to do, and that was to be respectful.
Wow.
I had to make a decision at that time. Okay, if I go to pull my husband off of him, there's a part in my mind, I feel like I'd already done that with my oldest son,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't end well for the son.
Mm-hmm.
So I went, no, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. Okay, if I go to try and remove the child, that's going to get yucky.
Mm-hmm.
So all these things are going through. The best thing I can do is video.
Mm-hmm.
And as painful as that is, you think I should be doing more. But the sad thing is in Pennsylvania, that is not illegal. Because he did not leave a mark on the child,
Mm-hmm.
that is not considered child abuse.
Wow.
And that's sad in itself.
Mm-hmm. So is this the red belly?
This is the red belly episode
Mm-hmm.
that people have seen or you can see on September 2014 airing of some shows
Mm-hmm.
on our situation on Dr. Phil.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I saw that. That was definitely disturbing.
Yeah, and what happened right after that, a friend of mine came up from Texas, Trina, and she came to visit, and I showed her this video, and I had actually shown it to a local counselor also, and they said, Renee, that's wrong.
Mm.
And I said, how come in tears, I said, as a 48-year-old woman, how can I not know that that's wrong? What is wrong with me?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And they said over counseling, like they didn't condemn me. They understood where I was, but in counseling, let's fast forward 6 months or so after this whole thing had gone public, I did find out, and this is the help for the women listening, is that's not normal for a healthy relationship woman at 48 to not know that that is wrong behavior.
Mm-hmm.
But for where I was, for what I had gone through, for what I had been told, they've called it brainwashing,
Mm-hmm.
that was normal. Not knowing that that was wrong was my normal. But there was still that part of me that knew something was off.
Right.
But it always twisted around.
Mm-hmm.
If I would discuss it with him, it was always, you don't know, you don't understand, it's your fault, it's because of you. And so I would dismiss it. And I'd go on again to the next situation. And for us, the next situation happened a few months later. And I came home from work, and I left the kitchen spotless. I walked in the house, and there was an orange juice container that was empty and not thrown away. And my husband was sitting in the living room, as he usually was. The kids were doing their thing. He was off on his own, and he was watching TV. And I said, hey, do you know who finished this orange juice? Because I knew the kids were in the house. I'd already, you know how a mother walks in the house and they count up their children.
Right.
Where are all the kids? Doom, doom, doom. So I knew where they were. I heard their voices, or somehow I had already talked to them. I don't remember that detail, but I knew they were around. So he said, oh, I did that. Well, I found out why it was happening because I wanted to go correct that child. Hey, I'm here now. They're all within earshot. I'll get them up. I'll use it as a training moment. I never expected him to be the one that kind of left the kitchen the way it was. Was it a big deal? No. But isn't that how most of these arguments happen when you're having issues with your abusive spouse? It's always this small little thing. Right. So I said, well, you could have at least gotten it closer to the trash can. As soon as that came out of my mouth, I said, no. Why did I say that? Now, many years later, I now know that that is a completely normal, acceptable sentence to say in a healthy relationship.
Right.
But at that time, I had just called out a full-fledged war, and I had no intention of doing it.
Wow.
And so at that moment, I had already kind of started, I'd already been in some counseling with my friend Trina. I was already learning right from wrong. I was pretty much realizing that this marriage couldn't go on like this anymore. So there was a level of disconnect from me with this argument, which made it so different from anyone prior. I was able to stay unemotional and almost disconnected.
Right.
And although I remember everything that happened, I did not have the level of emotion I normally would, because I had already realized that there was something wrong within him, and it wasn't me anymore.
Right.
When that tide changed for me, I didn't have this need to match him in his yelling, match him in his energy. And so the argument was almost surreal. He was saying things. He was talking about how I staged this argument and how he was mad that he started talking about how I had long, dark hair. He was talking about my hair being in the sink and how I left it there to make him angry on purpose. And we're having this conversation, and it's going on, and I'm kind of disconnected from it. And he says, so say you're sorry. And I'm thinking, okay, I missed something because I don't know what I'm supposed to be saying I'm sorry for.
Right.
And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do that this time, is what I thought to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked at him, and he said, say you're sorry. And I thought, should I ask? And I thought, no, this time I'm not going to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't say anything. And now there's an entire video that is not on the Dr. Phil show. You only see a bit of it, but he says, I think the part you guys are missing is where he says, if you don't say you're sorry, right? Oh, yes, sir. It turned into, he started saying, say yes, sir. It wasn't even I'm sorry. He started to say yes, sir. Say yes, sir. And I'm thinking, to what? What is going on? And he says, if you don't, I'm going to go get the spanking spoon. And the reason he called it a spanking spoon was because when the kids were younger, he would take a wooden spoon, and that's what they would be paddled with. Then he made a few of his own paddles out of wood as they got larger, and that's what he used. And he said, I'm going to go get it. In the video, the full video, he leaves. He goes, gets it. I turned to my, terrible moment. I thought, I'm going to have one of my kids video it. I go to hand him the video, my phone, and the look on his face was pure terror. And I don't even know how the two youngest kids got in the room. It was pure terror. And I was like, oh, never mind. You know, all I cared was to get audio. That was the biggest deal for me. Because this video was never for the police. This was for our pastors. This was for friends. This would be for any man that I could get him to listen to.
Right.
And so I just placed it on the counter on its side, hoping I'd get something, which I did. And then the rest is on the video. I wouldn't say yes, sir. And I just stared at him. And that was pretty much the level of my intensity I got to the whole time, which is why I knew this was not normal.
Right.
If I had come out of a yelling match, like a lot of times we had, I don't know, it would have just been different in my mind. Like it was, I guess maybe that's what it was for me. It wasn't deserved anymore because I didn't reach him in his intensity of yelling, because I didn't go there with him.
Right.
Because I kept it low-key the whole time, all of a sudden in my mind, I'm having this epiphany, as you can tell as I'm talking to you. In my mind, I said, wow, he really is not thinking with the clearest head, I'll call it, because he's all the way up here and he's spanking me, or let's call it hitting. I'm not even allowed to say spanking. That was the first thing the counselors got off of my lips. It's not a spanking, it was a hitting. It was abuse, it was assault. And so then I guess the rest is history. I didn't say yes, sir, he hit me. He warned me again. He's doing it in front of the kids. The kids are crying. I'm aware they're there. I say something like, daddies don't hit mommies. And he says, Mom, everybody deserves a spanking now and then. Now it's mommy's turn. And then at the very end of the video, I don't know if they played on the show, but you can hear the kids crying. They ran into the living room crying. And he said, what are you crying about? So he started scolding them for having feelings.
Right. Oh, jeez. And so the cycle continues, right? Wow.
And, you know, I've been very aggressive. We're 2.5 years almost down the road from that. And we're still aggressively all in counseling. We've had, you know, the opportunity to do that. And it takes a while. Like for women, I heard for marriages, it takes 5 years for every 5 years of marriage, it takes 1 year of recovery to pull out of that marriage. So for me, that would be 5 years of healthy counseling.
Right. Wow.
Healthy recovery, whether counseling is involved or not, for me to be where I should be. So I'm only halfway through the process.
Right. Wow. So do you feel like you have... Sorry, go ahead.
You had asked me before we started the show to possibly explain how this evolved into the Dr. Phil show.
Yeah.
And what happened is it did take me, from the time of that video, it did take me, I think it was close to 4 weeks to actually go to the police. I had a long conversation with him that I taped where I told him I can't be married to anybody who thinks it's okay to hit me or the kids. I had that conversation. I shared that with a pastor friend who told me it was in writing, he told me it was my fault that I got hit. I shared it with his other best friend who didn't think that, he thought it was my fault too. And at this point, you really grow wary of going to anybody who is of the same belief system of you,
right?
Because they're telling you it's their fault. So at this point, I had a breakdown at work with my work that I had friends I was supposed to deliver flowers for their daughter's bridal shower, and I was supposed to go to that bridal shower. I had the outfit laid out. I was ready. I was going to go to a football game. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was going to go to a midget football game, and then I was going to go to the bridal shower and miss my second midget football game of one of the boys that day. Well, it ends up we had an argument that morning, and then my brain clicked over. I forgot everything I had planned and ended up going to those 2 football games.
Wow.
And so when I realized that I had missed the shower because I went to the game, I ended up realizing I was in a tough place. My integrity is one of those things that you can't ever get your integrity back. Like once something goes wrong, like you can't lie. You have to always tell the truth. Well, I was so much wanting to protect my marriage that I was, as I'm driving with these flowers to the shower, which only had an hour to go, crying, I was thinking up lies that I was going to tell my friend for why I missed delivering flowers to their daughter's bridal shower. And that's when it clicked in me that, why am I lying for him again and again and again? But this is what we do as abused women.
Right.
Because how am I going to survive? We needed both our incomes just to get by. We had 5 kids together. There's no way I could make it on my own. Well, I get there to the parking lot. I called a friend who was a friend of this whole party. She happened to not be there. She's at her mom's house, and I had no clue that they had both been domestic violence victims themselves.
Oh, wow.
For 2 hours, I sat in this venue's parking lot with another lady who came out of the shower, all friends of this family, and they did what I would call an intervention for me.
Wow.
And some of the things they said to me were, don't worry about it. The money will be there. You're not going to starve. You can make this. And they painted the picture of, do you want to go back to this? Could you go back to this? How can you go back to this? These were the first people, aside of the counselor and my friend, that I had told about any of this. And the only reason I told them is I was backed into a corner of having to tell the truth of why I forgot to do something, because my business integrity is very important to me.
Absolutely.
To not forget anything, to not do anything wrong, to always deliver to my customer. Well, what was so interesting about this is I couldn't lie. I couldn't do that. I had to tell the truth in this circumstance because these people knew me so well. One of the things I was going to say is that somebody died. And I thought, I can't do that. If I do that, when my dad died, these guys brought me food.
Right.
They know me too well. And then I thought, I'll say a car broke down. I think that was the first thing I thought of. And that wouldn't work because you go borrow a neighbor's car. That wouldn't work. So the reason I'm being so transparent is because I get it. I've been there. And every other woman of abuse has been there. We lie for him. We lie for us. And in the end, it gets us nowhere because we're only protecting a lie of a marriage that's not even what other people think it is. It looks great from the outside.
Right.
but from the inside it's destroyed, and it is based on lies. But I ended up going to the police that night. I drove right from that intervention straight to our police department, showed them the video. The police officer I showed it to called his lieutenant immediately, and he said, "I need you to come look at this, sir." He came down, he looked at the video, he looked up to me, and he said, "Ma'am, I need to tell you that in all my years of being a police officer, I have to tell you that this is probably one of the most disturbing videos I have ever seen."
Wow.
And I looked at that video again through my warped glasses. I look at that and I go, why? But see, normal people know that that's not how husbands treat their wives.
Right.
That's not how husbands treat their children. So if you're going through anything that looks remotely like my situation, understand it's not normal. If you have questions if your marriage is normal, I wouldn't necessarily tell you these days. I hate to say, as a born-again believing Christian, I'm sorry to say that I can't even send you to your pastor. I need to send you to your abuse, domestic violence shelter in your town, because they will tell you the truth. And it's sad that that's where we're at.
It is.
But they're not going to make excuses. They're not going to throw scriptures on top of you and saying, if you had just done this, he wouldn't do this. As soon as abuse is introduced into a marriage, you can no longer do marriage counseling. It is contraindicated. Don't even try and do it.
Right. Yep.
So my husband fought this. And when I say husband, he's my soon-to-be ex-husband. It's been a long process, but he decided he was going to fight this. It took a whole year until 2013 until it got to court. And he decided that he was going to go to court and he was going to explain why he hit me. And surely a judge, and he picked a jury. He could have just done a bench trial with just a judge. He chose a jury.
Wow.
And that whole jury, within 1 hour, found him guilty.
Sure, of course.
And so the local newspaper puts in, husband goes to jail for hitting wife with spoon because she wouldn't say yes, sir. The Associated Press picked that up, as we had feared going into it, because he had a beautiful plea bargain put in front of him. All he had to do was give me a 3-year protection from abuse order, and they would have dropped all the charges. But he refused. So then he ended up in jail for not only hitting me, but for having broken the PFA. Those things were going to be ignored in the plea bargain. All of that was wrapped in. He ended up with 3 months in jail for that, plus 2 years probation. And so the Associated Press thought that was quite interesting. It got picked up. Of course, that went international. You can Google his name and find it all over the place in all these other countries. And then Dr. Phil's show started calling immediately. And that kind of went away, I think, when they went into hiatus. It just, nothing ever materialized. I was pretty much in no place to do anything, go and talk publicly about it. And it kind of went away.
Right.
And then it surfaced again in the summer of 2014. They said, hey, we're looking for next year's shows. Where are you guys at? And she even said, wow, the Renee I spoke to almost a year ago isn't even around anymore. You're a totally different person. Like, I had done so much counseling in that time. I had 2 to 5 hours a week of different types of counseling, different layers.
Wow.
You know, I was kind of like, I put myself on the fast track.
Yeah.
Even when I didn't want to go into counseling, I would go. I was working through this. And it wasn't for me per se as much as it was for my kids. My kids deserved a healthy parent. So there's times we do things, we do it for our kids, and it's not really for ourselves anymore.
Right.
Like going to the police, I went for my kids, because one of the things they were telling me in the intervention was, your boys are going to grow up thinking this is how you treat women.
Exactly.
If you don't make a stand. And that's what got me moving. That's what moves so many of us mothers, is understanding what's the long-term effect on this.
Yeah. And even, as you said, him chastising them for feeling something when you were being hit and reacting. I mean, just subverting their feelings, like that sends them on this fast track to becoming exactly like him, from what I know.
Exactly. I would have never even picked that up. I mean, it took counseling for me to understand the importance of feeling. Going to one of the best websites that my abuse counselor sent me to, and the books were Patricia Evans, verbalabuse.com. You can go there. You can find a lot of information. I just devoured her books. And there was times where I just couldn't even open them, because every time I opened them, felt like I was reading my life.
Wow.
And to understand that you're not alone is one of the biggest gifts that I think what you are doing is for women to understand they're not alone. 1 in 4 women that you meet tomorrow in your daily life, just going about your day, has been or are in a domestic violence situation.
Exactly.
That's a lot.
It's shocking, isn't it?
It is. It is. And that was the thing. You know, when I sat the next day after I went to the police, I had to go fill out my protection from abuse order. And the father of the young lady that I was supposed to deliver the flowers to her bridal shower, that family, I'm so close to that family that her father went with me. He's a friend of mine. He used to be a police officer in New York City.
Wow.
He understood the importance of it. And he sat with me that whole day and made sure I did it. Because he told me later he didn't think if he just sent me there, he didn't think I'd stay. And he was right. He made a good call on that. But as I sat there in the courthouse's office and I was looking around, and it was a very dingy office. It was very depressing. It had some peeling paint, a hole in the wall. It was kind of in the old section of the courthouse. It was where it felt like where they put the misfits, right?
Yeah.
And I sat there and I looked at my peer group there, which was all different types of people. We were all waiting for a judge to approve our PFA. I wasn't alone. And I sat there and I thought, how come I don't know who to call today? If they're telling me that one in 4 women has been abused, it's no respecter of what social class you are in, what ethnicity you are. It just transcends everything. You can just go pick any random sample of women from any slice of society, and 1 in 4 will have been abused or is being abused. So I started to go through all my friends thinking, who can I call today? Who do I look up to? I couldn't find one woman in my brain that I could call that was openly talking about her situation that I could go to. I mean, and then I thought of my role models. I thought of Rihanna with her situation. She was a celebrity. That doesn't fit my situation. And then I thought about The Burning Bed with Farrah Fawcett, the movie from, I think it was the late 70s.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't fit my situation. I had no one to look at. Where was the woman in Christianity or religious background that stayed in her marriage because it was the right thing to do, but then was abused? I could not think of anyone. And I can't name any names even now of anyone. I know I've run across some of their stories. And I thought to myself, you know what? If it's true, then you know what? They're just not going public. There's a shame to this. There's a shame to domestic violence. And I did something that we all do, and you kind of go, is that why I'm where I am now? Is that why I went on international television? Because I kind of made a vow to myself. I said, if I ever get the opportunity to share my story so that other people have a place to call, a person to touch base with, to come to, then I'm not going to be quiet, Lord. I am going to do that.
Wow.
And so when the Dr. Phil show thing came around and they're saying, do you want to do the show? And I said, does he want to do the show? Because, see, we're not talking. There's a protection from abuse. There's no contact. In the last 2.5 years, we have had 3 hours of contact, and that was in a counselor's office.
Mm-hmm.
So we do not talk. We do not have a relationship at all. So when I'm saying, does he really want to do this? They're saying yes. And so, you know, it took a few months until we actually got out to LA and filmed it in, you know, the end of 2014. But at that point, I'm thinking, okay, if this is what I'm supposed to be doing, then I'll do it for the opportunity to help other women. Mm-hmm. And I am glad to say that I have had women reaching out to me because of that. I made myself visible on Twitter and Facebook. I made myself findable. Mm-hmm. And the Dr. Phil show actually coached me to do that. They said, you're going to want to set up a Twitter page and certain things. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy that I can help people little by little. Mm-hmm. But what I'm really excited about is that it seems like everywhere I turn, women are standing up against domestic violence, such as yourself. And I know of other ladies that are doing things, and it's time.
Yeah, it's a tipping point.
It's time for this to come out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's just, it really is.
I don't want there to,
go ahead.
I don't want there to be a shame with it. That's the thing that I sat there and I thought, I'm going to choose to not be ashamed.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
When you look at domestic violence in my marriage, there was nothing I could have done to ever deserve being hit, humiliated, and treated the way I was treated.
Right.
And when you get to a point and you can say that, then you're on your road to recovery. What happens is people try and say, yeah, but there's two sides to every story. You surely weren't perfect in your marriage. Oh, hold on. We're not talking about a marriage here. In the marriage, definitely. I was not perfect in a marriage. We're not talking about that. Let's separate the two. There was never any reason in my relationship with another human being. Let's pretend it's not my husband. Mm-hmm. There's nothing I could do to the neighbor down the street, the lady at the grocery store, that would ever warrant her to take a paddle and hit me for not saying yes, ma'am, or yes, sir. Is that correct? I think we'd all say yes. Mm-hmm. So then why do you put me in a marriage with a man and then all of a sudden it becomes a gray area? Right. It's not a gray area. There's no reason that any man, any husband, any woman should hit their spouse or their significant other. Because we have to, you know, we've been talking man, woman, man, woman. Right. Let's make sure we all understand. We're more than aware, both of us, that 15 out of every 100 domestic violence situations are the female is the abuser. Mm-hmm. Whether that's a female to another female or female to another man. We do recognize that, but we say he in our circumstances because it is the majority. Right. But we don't want to leave anybody out. We understand that.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. That's a great point, Renee. Wow. So you've been talking a lot about being hit. I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are on, and you made a comment before we started recording about us not comparing. We really can't compare abuse situations. So I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are about the verbal and the emotional abuse that I'm sure took place in your home and the effect of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every relationship that ends, that has hitting in it, started with verbal abuse. Mm-hmm. The abuser has to get his victim into a position where he can get away with that. Let's just simplify it to that. Mm-hmm. But all verbal abuse doesn't always transcend and cross that bridge into the hitting. Mm-hmm. For me, the verbal, I think that was the most painful, not only in the healing process, but it was the most painful to live because it was almost every day. I was not doing things right. For me, it started as, again, he used my gifting. I liken it to the movie, The Taming of the Shrew. He never called me a shrew that I remember, but it was in my mind that he was Burt Reynolds or Burt Lancaster, whoever her husband was at that time, who did that. He was the man, and I was the woman who was out of control and needed to be put into her place, and that was his job to do for me.
Wow.
Now, so anytime I had an opinion, that's not fair to say. It's not any time. A lot of times when I had an opinion that he didn't like, he would tell me I was wrong. It was just ongoing. And I have to say that that's been the trickiest part of my counseling recovery, is understanding all the nuances to that. I want to say that I'm through the hitting part. I don't want to say I'm totally recovered because I don't understand all the layers of the onion. You know, healing with any type of recovery, you kind of picture it like an onion, and you're taking layer off of layer, and you can't get to some of those inner layers that need healed until you get those outer layers of the onion off.
Exactly.
So I'd hate to talk about where I am, but the verbal abuse for all of us was telling me what I thought, telling me what my motives were the biggest thing. I got to a point where I stopped talking altogether. I think it was the whole last year of marriage. It was just like we had been separated, even though I wasn't really aware of it, because anything I'd take to him, little things like, hey, I stopped and helped a lady with her car, and I called the tow truck for her because she didn't have a cell phone. Or it's been amazing. My whole life, my counselors and I kind of laugh about it. Things happen in front of me. I'm always there with my cell phone to call and get help. But like I'm talking almost abnormal amount of things that happen.
Right.
But, so I would come home and he'd tell me things like, you shouldn't tell people the things you do, because the right hand, he'd use scripture all the time. The right hand isn't supposed to know what the left hand is doing, and you don't get your blessing. So he was telling me that I cared too much about the motives. Like I didn't really help people for the goodness of my heart. I was helping people so I could brag, he told me. So I started to question my own motives for doing good things.
Jeez. Wow.
I know that I often, I think the biggest thing for me near the end was I had wanted to lose weight. After the fifth child, that weight just stayed there. I was over 40 when I had my fifth child. The weight was just lingering, and I needed to feel good about myself. And he was telling me that certain body parts didn't look good. I mean, he was flat out saying, hey, you know, when one day he looked at me, he goes, wow, when did your thighs get so big? So I was like, okay, I got to do something about myself. Maybe if I lose weight, he'll like me more. So I started going to the local recreation center, and I started taking classes. And I didn't know any of these people. I stood in the back. I was wearing a big T-shirt just to cover up everything. I was kind of humiliated to be there, but I went, and I got to know these people. And these people became my friends. Like I actually felt they liked me. And then one day I missed a few classes. And next time I went, they said to me, hey, we really missed you, Renee. You're not. It's not the same when you're not there. We miss your comments and your complaining. I hate lunges. I'd always complain about lunges. You know, we missed you. You're a lot of fun. And I was so tickled. I felt liked that I went home, and I said to my husband, I guess we had an argument. There was an argument ensued, and he was saying something to me, making me feel unliked, whatever that was. And I said, people do like me. People, they like me. I have friends at the rec center. They like me. They even told me that. And he looked at me, And he said, the only reason they like you is because they don't have to live with you.
Wow.
That was about a year before the whole thing unraveled for me.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the funny thing about that story is that was one of the first stories I told my abuse counselor at the local shelter.
Mm.
And every week I was going in there to see her, and I would say something that happened, or I'd remember something. And she would say to me, oh, yeah, that's typical. They all do that. They all do that. It's like all these abusers have the same playbook. They all do that.
Yeah.
And
true.
so this one week when she said this to me, I said, you know what? I said, I'm not going to tell you what he said. I'm going to tell you my story like I just told you,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're going to tell me what he said. We now joke about that in our relationship because she said she was really scared. I was putting her on the spot because, see, I wasn't believing her. I thought she was just kind of like, everybody can't be the same.
That's her pat answer.
So when I got to the punchline and, said, and I use the word punchline facetiously because this is no joking matter, but I said, what do you think he said when I said, I have friends, they like me? And would you believe she said it to the T, to the word? You don't have friends. They don't know you. They don't have to live with you.
Wow.
And I became a believer at that point in everything I was reading in those Patricia Evans books about verbal abuse. And I bought onto the whole domestic violence thing, hook, line, and sinker, then realizing that they are from all the same mold.
Right. It is the commonalities and just the threads, just there, the details of the picture are all very, very different, but the things they say, the things they do, the way they make you feel, the way they approach it, it really is frightening how.
And it's no different in the church. That's the scary part with these men in the church. And I think that's where I don't really have a real direction I'm going with awareness. I'm just kind of letting people come to me because I'm still on my own journey of recovery. And I can only help people so much. I know I'm not a counselor. I never expect to be. I just want to be a direction to point people. And that's why I have a blog. Renee Roberts Kopp.com is a very simple blog with some stories on it, but the very first blog is where I went for help because I was recreating all of it. I didn't have that person to look to or call or reach out to.
Right.
I didn't even have Patricia Evans' books at that time to go to, which I know you're also a fan of.
Yeah, but you're right, though. I mean, most of us don't know, especially if it's verbal abuse, don't know that it is actually abuse. And you don't know, like, even what to Google because there's something wrong. You're not sure what it is. And you've been so isolated, there's really nobody to talk to. And if you have the charismatic, charming husband or partner who's, everybody puts up on a pedestal, nobody's going to believe you anyway.
No, and they tell us that they're going to get the kids. They tell us that no one will believe us because they've set it up like that the whole time. And that's why we stay.
So are you saying that you started your own blog to write your own thoughts and then later you found Patricia Evans? Or
no, I started my blog right when I was about to do the Dr. Phil show because they had mentioned as a place for women to go. Because my situation, I know I'm not alone. There's no way I'm alone or unique in any way, shape, or form. And I believe even more and more ladies in the evangelical church will be coming out and feeling bold and unashamed as we go through this journey of awareness of domestic violence in the church and everywhere else. But I wanted to have some place where somebody could go and at least see how these are some things that get me started. I didn't even have that.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic, and I'm so glad to hear that you're doing that. And we did, just to recap, the Patricia Evans, she was a guest last week. at this point, people probably will have already heard her interview, but if you haven't heard it, then definitely go back because there's a lot of good stuff there. And then there's going to be a show notes page on the audaciouslife.com with all of the links to Patricia's books, as well as the verbalabuse.com website, which has that private forum where women can join and meet other women, a community of women who have been through all this stuff, and can support each other. And I think that is invaluable because you do feel so completely alone. And then when you step into that group, it's like, whoa, you're hearing other people say these things that you lived through and you thought it was just you, or, you're hiding it because you're the only one. And then you read these stories and it's shocking how familiar it all is,
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
Yep. No doubt about it.
And her books shed so much light on this topic and what to do, how to handle it. The interview that I had with her as well is just really helpful in identifying it and what to do. And, we can't tell people to leave or anything like that, but you have to assess your own situation and your own safety and your children's safety if you have children. But to just start to feel better and feel validated is an amazing first step. And I agree that the shame is such a big part of it. And when you realize that there's so many other people suffering with this, that, that shame really does need to go because it's so prevalent. I mean, I'm shocked. I mean, the person standing in line at the grocery store would tell me something, or we're waiting with our kids at the bus stop and somebody tells me something, or I'm at gymnastics with my daughter. And I find all these people who have been through this. It's alarming. It really is. It's like,
well, that's wonderful that they are comfortable enough sharing.
Yes.
That is very rare, I would have to say, in the area I live, in a very conservative Christian area, right in the heart of Amish country.
Okay.
And there's like this robe of shame. People don't talk about what they've gone through and what they go through.
Mm.
And I think that's what I'm renouncing here is that's just ridiculous. I think the thing that upset me, there's only one thing that really upset me about after doing the Dr. Phil show was I didn't read, there's comments, I guess, all over the place.
Okay.
I have a friend who read probably 1,000 of them about the show and the comments. And, a lot of people are saying, why didn't she leave? Why'd she do this? Why'd she do that? Mainly they were questioning him, the abuser. How could he do this?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that upset me was if anybody is watching my journey and they're seeing me take a step out to be vulnerable, to have the courage to do this, and yet they see this person being shot at left and right as they take this step, then who's going to want to follow in those footsteps and do the same thing and step out? That's what infuriated me about the comments, is these women that are reading this, they'd already thought this themselves, and then they think, well, I don't want people saying that about me. One of the hardest things to take and is the fact that I videoed my son being hit.
Right.
And Dr. Phil brought it up on the show. Him and I agreed on the answer. It was actually the best thing to do in that circumstance. You could never make me feel guilty about that, but because I was there, I lived it. I knew, I was aware of what I was doing. But the thing that upsets me about that is being attacked for that. And there's many other women who have made other decisions like that, whatever they may be. And I don't want them to be scared to step out.
Right. Yeah.
I want them to feel empowered.
Right. Well, the unfortunate thing is if someone believed you, you wouldn't have to get video recording of your child being hurt by his father. The whole point is you knew that it would have escalated, or I'm assuming you just, to show somebody what was actually happening is you can't you can't dispute what's on the videotape. If it was your
No.
word against
And the two
his, that's very different.
Yeah, and the two reasons I videoed were the fact that, one, I thought I was going insane, because if I would recant or retell a story to him that happened, he would say, no, that didn't happen. That's all part of verbal abuse. When they recreate the history that really happened and they mistell it, that's all verbal abuse. That's gaslighting.
Gaslighting, yeah.
And so I thought I was going crazy, so I videoed it. But also, when I did that, I had no clue how helpful that would be until many months later, when I saw how that video was opening this door to that door, and within the system, in the legal system. Because can you imagine me trying to explain to people the sentence of, yeah, my husband hit me. I was not yelling at him. We were having a conversation, and because I wouldn't say yes, sir, to him for something, I'm not even sure what it was, he told me he was going to go get a paddle and hit me, and then he hit me. Nobody would ever believe that.
Right, exactly. It's so absurd, for one thing. It's just like...
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the videoing, I mean, like you said earlier, you kind of want to tell everybody to video left and right, but yet on the other hand, we don't want women to be put into positions where they're making it. This is serious stuff. This is just not a spanking, I'm saying with quote fingers in the air. This is just not, and I shouldn't even say just. Women's lives are in the balance. Anytime. So we're not saying, yes, start videoing, and then you get in a situation where he is now pushed over the edge, and something terrible happens.
Exactly.
And you're putting a safety plan on your website, right?
Yes.
Directing them?
Yes.
Yeah, I implore everyone to check that out and follow that at the right pace that they're supposed to. I heard Dr. Phil say it's not the speed at which you do it, you get out, but it's at the level of safety that you get out. It's not about doing it quickly, but it's doing it in the safest way possible.
Right, exactly. And I think this has been one of the things that I've tried to explain people about this whole podcast and the whole idea for a community and things to help women. Everybody wants people to just get out. They just think it's really, really simple, and the quicker the better. And that's just not the case. The only person who knows what that pace should be and can judge that, because like you said, there are lives hanging in the balance, and it's not always just the mother. Often it's the children, and the children are being used as, weapons. They'll threaten to harm the children, and they will follow through on it. So I think those are things people just don't even consider. So you really need to take your time, work with outside people, get that plan in place, and that can take as long as a year for some people. It might take 3 weeks, it might take 3 months, but it really does depend on your situation, and that should not be simplified or minimized in any way. It's no small thing. So,
I think one thing I like to add, because I'm sure we're just about done here, is I never wanted out of my marriage. I always thought my marriage was fixable. And so now I see it totally different. I see it as something that once they hit you, once they tear you down and turn you into somebody else that you never were, that vow, those vows that you took in the marriage, the covenant, he broke that. It's already broken. You are married in the eyes of the law, but in the covenant you made between God, it's been destroyed. And what I realized quite simply is, I heard at one time, there is a website called, for the Christian viewers or listeners, cryingoutforjustice.com, cryingoutforjustice.com. There's a group of writers for that Jeff Crippen is one, and Barbara Roberts is another. And they are both Christian authors who have made their life passion speaking out to those women and victims in a Christian community that are stuck. And I saw something very early on from Barbara Roberts that it was a video, and I got it. As soon as I heard it, it just was like the light bulb went on. And I realized that I had made my marriage an idol, that I had set the marriage, just the whole covenant of marriage, I made that more important than the entities within that family. In other words, I was letting my kids be in a terrible situation because of marriage. I was letting myself be torn down, abused, controlled, victimized because of marriage. And when I realized that that wasn't pleasing to God, that he didn't make marriage man to serve marriage, he made marriage to serve man, all of a sudden I was like, oh, Lord, I am so sorry that I did that, that I put this marriage word above my kids, which now, as I said earlier, 2.5 years of counseling so far we've been going through.
Wow. And how are they doing?
So that was my eye-opening. Yeah. Everybody, we're on the right road, but it's not easy. You know, there's so many times when you know to get to the better place, there's never an easy path.
Right.
The biggest thing is not giving up until it feels right, until I know we're through it. And no matter how long that takes, you know, I made a vow that I will fix what I broke, what I allowed to be broken under my watch.
Right.
You know, I'm here to see it through until we're all where we need to be.
Wow. That's quite a commitment. Your kids are really fortunate that you're as strong as you are and clear-headed, and that you had this strong conviction and this voice, and you're putting yourself out there. I mean,
I'm telling you, a lot of my growth has come from those places, verbalabuse.com and crying out for justice. Those places have kept me, I feel, very balanced in understanding what I went through.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Renee. Is there anything else that you want to leave us with before we say goodbye and let you go?
No, I think I just want to say thank you for doing this for the ladies. I hope they do take advantage of the resources that you're making available, and however you're going to be available to them or to any of those speakers on here, I'm available. You can find me however you're on the show notes page, as you said. I'm really not a counselor, but I will direct people to where I think, you know, that I found stuff along. And I'm still only halfway through my recovery according to the timeline, you know, if there is one.
Right.
You know, if it's a 5-year recovery for a 25-year marriage, if that's true, then I have a ways to go. But really, domestic violence changes the whole course of the whole rest of your life. I will always have that with me. It's made me who I am, but I'm not broken. I'm not a defect. One of the reasons that I think that we women stay in our marriages is we think that's the best it's ever going to be. That's, you know, we'll never find anyone else. Well, it's not about finding anyone else for me. It's about being healthy, happy, and protected, and knowing that I will have a tomorrow. There's nobody wants to live in the fear of not knowing if you're going to make it through the next day, if you're going to be alive.
Right. Wow.
I went to bed scared many nights, no doubt about it. So many of us say that. That's no place to be. We can all relate to that who've been in these situations.
Right. Oh, no, it's so easy to go back there just talking about that, like just not being able to sleep with that fear. You know, my heart goes out to anybody listening who's in that position right now. So worth visiting the resources that we mentioned, getting that confirmation from other people that you're not alone, and then getting some tools in your hands to help you help yourself and feel better and figure out what you need to do, really. Well, thank you so much, Renee.
Thank you for having me.
This episode is sponsored by Undolus.com. You've taken control of your life this far, so why not take control of your dating too? The choice is yours. Check out Undolus.com. Undolus.com has leveraged the power of the feminine collective. That's right, the sisterhood. There are lots of other women out there like you, and they don't want to date a creepy guy or stalker type. And they don't want you to end up with one either. You'd both rather have the good guy. So maybe that guy who didn't work out for them, he'll be perfect for you. And maybe your dud date is their diamond. Undolus is a place where women can gather, share their thoughts on the men they've spent time dating, whether on a date or a full relationship. Undolus can perform a simple background check too, and cross-reference it with women's ratings to give you a dateability score. How cool is that? So go ahead, check out Undolus.com, Undolus.com. Come on, leave some dirt on your ex and help a sister out. Or rate that guy who was sweet but didn't quite work out for you. Heck, you can even leave a review on your best guy friend, the one who's having trouble finding Mrs. Right. Let's help the good guys float to the top. Use promo code ALIFE and leave 3 reviews to get a free background check. That's ALIFE. You've got power, so let's wield it. Let's use the feminine collective, sign up today, rate your date, and let's build this database so we have a safe place to go to find the good guys and start dating again. Go to Undolus.com, Undolus.com. So quite a few resources were mentioned during this show, and I just want to recap the most important one, which is about safety planning. So if you are thinking about leaving or you're just feeling unsafe, you should have a safety plan in place, and you can find lots of information about this at the National Domestic Violence Awareness site, and that is thehotline.org, thehotline.org. And if you go to thehotline.org/help or look for the help link on the page, scroll down and you'll actually see safety planning right there. You could also Google all those words, of course, and find the same resources. The other resource that Renee mentioned is her blog, and that blog is Renee Roberts Kopp.com. And Renee is Renee Roberts with an S on the end, and Kopp is Kopp. So it's Renee Roberts Kopp.com. And she also mentioned a Christian website that talks about domestic violence, and that website is cryingoutforjustice.com. cryingoutforjustice.com. All of these resources will be folded into the Audacious Life website, which I'm trying my best to get it up and out. A little bit behind, but maybe by the time you listen to this, if you're not listening in the first week or two of the podcast, it'll already be there. But in case you're a new listener, the podcast is new, you might have to just listen and Google for these things. So my apologies for that. Doing the best that I can. And thank you for listening. If you have time to give us a review and rate the podcast, that will help us keep this podcast afloat and expand our listenership. So I appreciate that. Thank you for listening, and please do forward this on to anybody you know who may be suffering from verbal, emotional abuse, or just being controlled and isolated by the person that they're with. This podcast, I assume, will be incredibly validating for somebody in that situation. That's really the aim of this. So please do share it at your discretion, and thanks again for listening.